Hello and welcome to week 7 for our literacy development course. I wanted to make a few comments and guide us through an activity that I'd like to see everyone engage in this week as we conclude the section of the course on reading comprehension. There's a particular theme or aspect that I really want to try to drive home this week, and a reading activity that I'm going to try to kind of guide you through. And I'm going to prompt you in this video. I'm going to make a few comments. I'm going to suggest that you stop the video, go into a particular activity, then come back, continue the video, and I'll make comments along the way. You're going to post your thoughts on the experience on this activity. It'll be our discussion activity for the week that you'll see prompted in the week in the Module 7 discussion. So what I'd like to start with this is there are a couple of resources listed in Module 7. One of them is a document for annotation symbols. This might be an approach that you're familiar with. This document is 2 sides, so it has a collection of options. This is a very handy and helpful approach, particularly when you're working with students on close read approaches that we've looked at in the last couple of weeks. It could be used in math with word problems, could be used in a variety of contexts to help students document and organize their thinking, their confusion, identifying the main idea, identifying connections. If you look at that resource, you'll see a lot of options in different ways that annotations can be done, and we're going to try a couple today. You also have 2 different articles that I'm going to have you read and prompt you to go into in just a moment. They're both about the topic of school finance, and I will wait until the end to talk about why I chose this particular topic for this activity, or a bit of a simulation, if you will. So I'll come back at the end. The first one that you're going to read is a state report on how schools are funded in the state of Indiana by the state through the Indiana sales tax, and how that money gets distributed. That's going to be the first one I'll prompt you to do. And the second one is more of a summary article about changes that the state made in how school funds are organized. And we'll get to that in a bit. So the first thing that I want you to do as we look at the annotation symbol handout, there are a couple of annotation symbols I want you to use for this first reading activity. We're just going to use a few. I'm looking at this side of the document. For this first article in particular, there are 2 annotation symbols I want you to focus on as you read this particular article. And it's quite lengthy. It's not going to be necessary to read the entire thing. I'm going to have you go to about page 12. Should be sufficient to take, through page 12 will be your stopping point when I prompt you to read this one. As you do that, I want you to focus on 2 annotation symbols. The question mark, which simply will document things that as you read you are confused about, or questions come to mind. And the other annotation symbol I want you to focus on with this one is just simply a circle to document words that you are unfamiliar with, or you are confused by the words and its usage in the context of this school finance article. So what we're going to do now is, without a lot of preparation or any other sort of piece to it to get you going, I want you to immediately, with those 2 annotation symbols in mind, go into this article, read the first 12 pages, and document your questions about concepts with a question mark, and document your confusion on words with a circle, and go ahead and pause this video at this time. Okay, so you have just attempted to survive what I'm sure was a thrilling experience of reading what is almost a bit of a technical manual related to how school finance works in the state of Indiana. You ran into a lot of very specific, content-specific phrases and wording. I'm sure you documented a lot of things that you might have been unsure or confused about. Of note and of interest is that in the discussion this week, you'll be asked to write about that experience and what it felt like to read something like this, of which I basically did nothing to prepare you in advance to navigate the text, which is part of what the theme is about. You read a professional article last week about background knowledge, how to build it, its importance, etc. And I just put you through a reading selection where I basically made no attempt to help you or prepare you from a background knowledge perspective. I choose school finance because I know it's a topic that generally students in this course would not have a lot of interaction and knowledge of. Because of my work in the last 12 to 15 years in school administration, it's a topic that I'm familiar with and know the vernacular and et cetera, but I know you don't. And I'm trying to find something that simulates what it's like when we ask students to read something that they don't have the prerequisite background knowledge. So, putting that article one aside, now let's look. I'm going to try a little different approach with the second article. There is a document in your resource section in Module 7 that just says Budget Changes Docket, something like that. It looks like this, very simple, has two sides. And I'm going to go over this briefly before launching you into reading Article 2. So basically, you've got a side with 5 silos, and that visual illustrates the historical way that school funds were organized in the state of Indiana, and there were 5 different sort of funds or accounts or silos. And the reason why it's noteworthy to use the term silo and to use the visual as such is that when school funds were organized like this, you could not send funds from one silo into the funds of another silo. So if you had money in bus replacement, let's say you had $1 million in bus replacement, but you don't need any new buses, but your general fund that paid teaching salaries was short, you could not move money from bus replacement in its silo to the general fund silo to help fund teachers. It was against state law, so you could not do it. Further, if you look at those different silos, most of them are self-explanatory. General fund paid for education, programming, teaching salaries, etc. Capital projects would be in reference to any improvement to facilities at your school system. Debt service would be the debt that is incurred to build a new school or etc. Transportation would be paying for the drivers, their fuel, etc. And then, of course, bus replacement to buy a new bus. So in 2019, the state of Indiana, and there is a bit of what I went through, there's a kind of a primer here that gives you a little explanation background and where the money came from to fund those things. In 2019, the state of Indiana made a substantial change and took the 5 silos and put the money in 2 buckets. And that visual lays that out and called it the Education Fund and the Operations Fund. The Education Fund encapsulates the old general fund and is basically where you find educational programming, teaching salaries, etc. The Operations Fund is a combination of the old capital projects, bus replacement, and transportation funds. Debt service continues to be its own separate thing and is not really involved in this conversation today. But basically, you had 5 silos. 4 of the 5 got combined into 2 silos. Okay, so that's a little bit of background of what you're getting ready to read now, which is an article from 2019 explaining the changes that were coming in the way these school funds were organized. So a couple of other things that I'll say. There's a few terms that you're going to come across as you read Article 2 that you're probably going to be like, what is that? On the first page, you're going to see some acronyms. HEA 1009. That stands for House Enrolled Act. That means that it is a law that has passed both sides of the legislature. When the legislature is doing its when it's doing its bill creation work, if you see in the media that something is called a House bill or a Senate bill, that means it hasn't passed both sides and been signed by the governor as law. If you see it worded or labeled as an acronym as Enrolled Act, that means it's passed both sides of the legislature and the governor signed it and it's a law. So this goes into explaining how House Enrolled Act 1009 changed the way school funds are organized forever. In another acronym, IASBO, Indiana Association of School Business Officials. When you see that, this article gets commentary from the executive director of that organization. That organization represents school business managers, school boards, and superintendents with regard to the business side of running a school system. And maybe an additional a phrase that you might see that might bring some confusion would be around the concept at the top of page 2, related to some of the different things that go into the business side of school systems. Most of those phrases would be self-explanatory, but when you see things like property insurance, utilities, many people are surprised to find that the same issues that you need to deal with in your own home in terms of insurance, maintenance, et cetera, all go on within a school system as well. So one last phrase that you might find in the article that, again, you might be like, I've never seen that before. Levy. There's a reference to maximum levies. Anytime the term levy is used, that is a fancy financial term or vernacular for a tax. A levy is a tax. Simple as that. So when you see references to maximum levy, that's in reference to the highest tax that a school system will be approved by the state of Indiana to levy or to put on their tax-paying residents. And that's another phrase you might run into. So a little different this time. This time I've made an attempt to prepare you a little bit for a few of the things you're going to run into with this article. So take a look at this prep document a little more if you need to, and then dive into Article 2. Go ahead and take some time to read it. This time, on the annotation side, two things that I want you to focus on. This time you're going to organize your understanding. There's an annotation symbol, a star, anytime you read something that seems important or is key to the main idea. So as you read this, anything you think is a central idea, put a star by it. Also, on the other side, there's a reference to brackets as a possibility for key or main ideas. So feel like you can use either one. Also, at the bottom, there's a note. Anytime we suggest that kids can write in the margins, it's always helpful to them, and you might want to do some of that as well. So go ahead into Article 2. You've got two different annotation symbols you're going to use to organize your understanding of main idea or key themes. Go ahead and hit pause now. Go ahead and read this, and then when you come back, I'm going to make some concluding comments. Okay, so you have read both articles. I'm guessing Experience 2 was a little easier to deal with than Experience 1. A couple things about Experience 1. This particular article has much more advanced vernacular and vocabulary that would be specific to the finance world. This one is more generally written, and this was in a newspaper in Terre Haute when the changes came out. So just the decision on a reading selection alone is something to note. And as you think about your learners that you're working with, you know, this particular one, I did not do a very good job of thinking about where you're coming from. Some of you might have some previous business experience, so you might be able to better navigate this. But if you don't have previous business experience from a first career before you came into this work, this would probably be very difficult to navigate. I'm guessing that I'm going to read that many of you were frustrated and generally lost when you read this. Whereas the second one is written in a little more layman's language, in addition to the attempts I made to build some basic background knowledge, just explaining what a levy was before getting into the second one. And I made no attempt in the first article to explain any of the vocabulary that you ran into. Biennium, that would be in reference to a 2-year situation. There's a lot of verbiage right out of the gate in Article 1 that generally would hit you pretty hard. Indiana code numbers, FY 2014 to 2018, that would be reference to fiscal year. I could go on and on. There's a lot of technical verbiage that I did not prepare you for. You probably had to look up on your own, or maybe you just gave up. So the point of this is, as we close our study of reading comprehension, no matter your subject area, being a builder of background knowledge is about as important a concept that we can impress upon you in this course that if you take nothing else, being very thoughtful and explicit about preparing students for reading selections before you put them into it. Prepare them for the requisite vocabulary and prepare them for the words and what they mean in context before you have them do the reading. Give them necessary foundational history and background stuff before you launch them into context. This was my attempt to better show that before you read Article 2. That is a key learning of our understanding of developing literacy. Historically, I don't think we've done much emphasis on that. We've thrown kids in reading selections at the secondary level. We've judged them when they've been bored or been unable to connect, and we personally haven't done everything we can do to prepare students for that experience. Another thing that I typically do with this activity, particularly when this course meets in person, is do more background explanation as to why you should even care about reading this. All of you are already in schools in Indiana, or you're preparing to do so, and we all do this as a calling, but we also all have bills to pay, and understanding how school finance works, I argue, is generally a decent thing for teachers to know the basics about. To be able to point out when administrators aren't telling them everything, as one example, being able to keep up with any changes or trends that occur. So setting kind of a reason or a motivation to read is pretty critical. Might be difficult with something as dry as this, but even with this, it's an important thing to do. I'm going to close with this to accentuate the point of the importance of building background knowledge. There is a really fascinating study that the University of Virginia put out a little over a decade ago, where they really tried to isolate and put this background knowledge issue to the test, and they did it in a really interesting way. And this is with college freshmen, so I think it's pretty applicable to what we're looking at the secondary level. So the University of Virginia, I'm sure many of you are aware, is one of the most prestigious public universities in the country. It's usually listed as one of what is known as the public Ivies, along with the University of Michigan or Cal Berkeley or the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. It's a hard school to get into from a public school perspective. So really strong student population, etc. So all of us probably had to survive a U.S. history course as a freshman in college. It's almost always a prerequisite for any major. Bethel, no different, I'm sure. So professors at the University of Virginia interested in literacy development partnered with U.S. history professors at UVA and also went to a local community college in the Charlottesville area in West Virginia and posed this basic question: how does background knowledge influence performance in an introductory U.S. history course at the college level for freshmen? So they convinced a set of professors at both a community college and the University of Virginia to standardize their curriculum and have the same teach the same content, have the same expectations for mastery of learning. So they standardized the curriculum and the expectations of students. And you would think, predictably so, the students at the community college situation are naturally not going to do as well. The literacy professors did one very interesting thing after they convinced the professors in the two situations to standardize the curriculum and the expectations. They said to the community college professors, we want you to be very explicit. We have prepared, and we want your input, and you can expand on it, but we have prepared a series of background knowledge work, both with vocabulary, video series, other readings, suggested notes for many lectures to better prepare students for the background knowledge they need to access these aspects of U.S. history and our expectations of showing mastery in essays that have to be written and in discussions in small group formats. So there was this monumental effort placed at this community college, and then an assumption that the students at UVA had most of this background knowledge. After they implemented that, they taught this the semester, they did it for a full year, and compared the results at the community college level with the students at UVA. And their findings were fascinating, that after that focus on background knowledge, intensity of preparation for students at that community college, the gap in performance between the students at the community college and the students at UVA were significantly reduced, and not quite equal, but substantially reduced from when things were left status quo previously. And of course, the proposed findings and results were that explicit focus on background knowledge is a critical accelerator to helping students access grade level content. It's a study that I've generally found that I think I buy into. I would encourage you to strongly consider it. And this idea of background knowledge building, not just context and background, but vocabulary prep and development, can be a significant accelerator to help kids that are behind access grade level content. So I hope this activity helped illustrate the importance of building background knowledge. Just throwing someone into something like this is not good instruction, and I was hoping to simulate what it might have felt like for you reading this, and it might be hard to figure out and navigate the wording, and that is how our students feel when we put them in reading selections that they are not prepared for. It might make us more cognizant going forward as we work with students on reading content in our own content areas for literacy development. So hope that you got something from this activity. I look forward to the responses in the discussion post for this week. Thank you.